On this week's Eastern Conference edition of Locked On NHL, the Pittsburgh Penguins made a trade, and is it one of many to come? We'll have that conversation, plus the Washington Capitals remain red hot, and we had our first Battle of Ontario this season.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On NHL, your team every day. I'm Ross Levitan from Locked On Ottawa Senators, alongside Mike DiStefano from Locked On Toronto Maple Leafs. It is your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers will get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Today is Wednesday, November 13th, and Mikey, it's a big 3-0 shutout for the Sens in the Battle of Ontario. Now, I'll ask you the same question I asked Brandon.
Why do we start with this? Why you got to start? Why we got to start here, huh? There's a lot going on in the NHL. You think the people care about the Battle of Ontario? Who cares about that? You got Ovi approaching the goals record, at the Penguins making trades. This is where you want to start?
Yeah, we'll get to all that. We always start by asking about our teams. It's just funny timing that we're coming off a 3-0 win. Let me ask you what I asked Pilsy, though. How much of that was Ottawa being on top of their game, and how much of it was the Maple Leafs putting on their jersey and maybe not even tying their skates?
I'm not even sure if they tied their skates based on the way that they were playing. I think it's a good point. Like, I think Ottawa, they played really, really well. I thought that they were really on top of it. They showed up to the Battle of Ontario expecting a fight, and the Maple Leafs thought that they were out there playing ringette. I don't know. Like, they were not playing with any amount of urgency at all. They had 20 turnovers, and it just was not a good game from the Maple Leafs. It really, really wasn't. I would say, if I'm putting it, I would say 90% Ottawa, 10% Leafs. It was a butt kicking, a classic butt kicking by the Ottawa Senators. Leafs just did not have their game from start to finish, and Ottawa played well. So I think it's a classic case of one team showed up to play from start to finish, and the other one opposite, didn't show up at all. Might as well have left their equipment and just said, we'll take the L there, because that's essentially what ended up happening.
Yeah, it's too bad, man. We were really excited about the game beforehand. We had you on LOSP, and we were like hyping it up. The first time they played since the Ridley Gregg slap shot, Morgan Riley's cross check, 5-game suspension, and it was no physicality until the third period when Oliver Ekman-Larsson kind of snapped when Shane Pinto bumped into Anthony Stolarz. Now, when I say bumped into the goalie, he was like at the hash marks coming out to challenge. I think that was more frustration than anything. Those stat cards they put up after the game on Twitter?
Yeah.
They had to move the ledger over to the right just to get Oliver Ekman-Larsson on the screen.
Yeah. Look, it wasn't a good game. It really was not a good game at all. I think the Senators ended up winning the 5-on-5 expected goal differential. I think it was 74% in favor of the Senators. The deserved to win-o-meter was 57%. So hats off to your Sens, Ross. Hats off to your Sens. They won their Stanley Cup last night, but it's all right. The Leafs will regroup, and they got a tough matchup. They on second night of a back-to-back, they got Ovi and the Capitals that they gotta worry about now. So the Sens, That's in the past.
So you're saying that Ottawa winning in Toronto is their Stanley Cup?
Yeah.
So that means that's 4 straight Stanley Cup wins for the Ottawa Senators. The Leafs haven't beaten them in their own barn since 2022.
You can hang it in the banner. Hang that banner in the rafters, that new sparkly building that's going to pop up in downtown Ottawa. You can get your regular season Stanley Cup banners for beating the Maple Leafs in a regular season game. Go ahead, put those up. It's not like there's a cup to hang a banner for or anything.
All right. Well, all the banners are collecting dust up there at the Scotiabank Arena. They've got to hang banners for other sports teams that play there just to keep it interesting.
They won. They didn't end up winning the Canadian Division banner. I don't know. Yeah, I think they at least did win that banner.
What do you get, a beaver tail hang up there for that?
I don't know.
That's way worse. Because now,
it's not. That's 82 games. You've won
56. 56. Not even a
56.
full season.
Yeah,
Wait,
56,
come on.
55 more than the game that the Sens won last night. Relax
Oh
yourself.
my goodness. Hey, I'm just feeling good. The Senders looking for some sort of consistency. Sens have the Philadelphia Flyers at home tomorrow night. As you mentioned, the Leafs taking on the Capitals tonight. And as bad as Oliver Ekman-Larsson was last night, he has had a long career. Will play game number 1,000 tonight. I like those redemption stories. He was bought out in Vancouver, signs a 1-year ticket at a low AAV in Florida, wins the Stanley Cup, and has now kind of rebooted the second half of his career. What's been your impression since OEL's gotten to Toronto, and some thoughts on his entire 1,000-game career?
Yeah, last night obviously wasn't his best game, but he's played well this year. He really has. I've been impressed with what Oliver Ekman-Larsson has been able to bring to the table, not only from a puck moving perspective, which he's been known for throughout his career, but I think he's played well defensively in his own end as well. He's been well positioned, and I think that's been really good for the Maple Leafs. It was a signing that got a little bit of criticism in the offseason, mainly because of the term that he got, 4 years. But he's looked good, so no complaints for me when it comes to OEL. But yeah, 1,000 games in the NHL. It's nothing to snuff at, man. That's impressive. You got to be a pretty good player. You got to be a durable player to get to 1,000 games. And obviously, I think we all remember the OEL, in his early days when he was a part of the Arizona Coyotes, ripping home 15, 20 goals a year. Was a absolute beast on the power play, putting up 50, 65 points each and every year. That was, his prime, I guess we'll say. But to your credit, or to your point, he deserves a lot of credit for having that young early rise, and then there was a rapid decline quickly in Vancouver, but he kind of got things back on the rails last year, and he's kind of picked up where he left off from there this season in Toronto. So, 1,000 games in, he's still a very serviceable NHL defenseman.
You think he got spooked out when he saw Travis Green at the rink yesterday?
Maybe that was it. Maybe that was it. Yeah. Him and Greeny maybe didn't see eye to eye too well in Vancouver. Didn't go well for either of them.
No, they didn't. But look, the Leafs are still in a good spot. We joke, but they have still won 3 of their last 4 games.
Without Matthews, I might add, that game last night, there was no Austin Matthews. So
who has 1 goal in his last 10 games against Ottawa. I crunched the numbers on that one.
What'd he do in the first game against Ottawa?
He had a loss in that game too. Another Stanley Cup. Another Stanley Cup. Another one. I mean, the Sens are a dynasty at this point. So all jokes aside, we are here to break down the entire Eastern Conference. And I want to tease the next segment, but get your thoughts on the trade that actually happened. A lot of what we're going to discuss with Pittsburgh is what could be next. But Lars Eller back to Washington, where he scored the Stanley Cup clinching goal in 2018. Your thoughts on that trade from both sides? A 3rd and a 5th round pick going back to Pittsburgh.
Hey, it makes a lot of sense. The Capitals know what Lars Eller is all about. Obviously, winning a Stanley Cup with that team, and he left, was it last summer, I believe? So he hasn't been gone for too long. And they saw the blood in the water with the Penguins, and they're apparently a fire sale might be upcoming. And they said, hey, we want to get our guy back. We need a little bit more depth down the middle. We need a 3rd line center. Let's go out and get Lars Eller to be just that. And I think it's a good fit. We know that he works. We know that the Capitals know how to use him. And it's a team that looks like they're going to be a playoff squad. I mean, the Capitals are a team that I think right up there with the Jets for being the biggest surprise teams in the NHL this year so far, to this point at the very least, and just adding a little bit more depth. There's nothing wrong with that. And, it's a little, he's getting paid a little bit. Did Montreal or did Pittsburgh retain anything in that deal? I didn't see. I don't believe so either. So it is, a little bit of a heftier contract to bring on, but they know what they're getting in the player, and they obviously like him. So I thought it was a pretty good deal on both sides. The Penguins, they just need to collect some assets and kind of retool on the fly, create some flexibility, some cap space. You got to get younger, and moving out Lars Eller kind of helps them do a couple of those things.
They got to figure it out in Pittsburgh because things are going off the rails rather quickly. A report in The Athletic with Taylor Haas, I believe, was the reporter, saying that Kyle Dubas says everyone except for Sidney Crosby is available for trade. Huh? More on that discussion next. You're listening to Locked On NHL, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Select Quote. Select Quote's licensed insurance agents are the perfect teammate when shopping for customized, affordable life insurance. They can find you the right policy to keep your financial legacy safely in your family's end zone. Select Quote is one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience helping over 2 million customers find over $700 billion in coverage since 1985. If you're in good health, they work with carriers that could get you same-day coverage for up to $5 million, no medical exam required. And these policies are more affordable than you think. You could get coverage for up to $1 million for as little as $20 per month. Head to selectquote.com and a licensed insurance agent will call you right away with the right policy for your life and your budget. Select Quote, they shop, you save, get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/lockedonnhl. Go to selectquote.com/lockedonnhl today to get started. That's selectquote.com/lockedonnhl.
Today's show is also brought to you by Omaha Steaks. New sponsor alert here on the Locked On NHL podcast. Omaha Steaks, nothing delivers comfort and joy quite like an unrivaled quality and taste of Omaha Steaks. This year, skip the holiday hustle and bustle and save 50% off gourmet gifts site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, get a $30 reward card when you shop early and score an extra $30 off with the promo code NHL. With 5 generations of experience, they consistently deliver the world's best steak experience, and the gifting experts at Omaha Steaks have made it easy to deliver the perfect gift with thoughtfully curated gift packages starting at $88.99. From legendary steaks to mouth-watering desserts and more, save 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, our listeners get an extra $30 off with the promo code NHL and a $30 reward card when you shop early. That's 50% off at omahasteaks.com, OMAHA steaks.com, and an extra $30 off with the promo code NHL. Minimum purchases may apply, only available to U.S. customers.
Welcome back, Locked On NHL, your team every day. We're a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We have local experts on the biggest stories 5 days a week, so make sure to like and subscribe everywhere you get podcasts, including on YouTube. The Pittsburgh Penguins. I'm fascinated with this team. Hunter Hodes has you covered over at Locked On Penguins, 6-9-2. They sit 7th in the Metropolitan Division right now. What would you do if you were Kyle Dubas with the state that this team is in?
Yeah, I mean, they got absolutely dummied the other night. Like, you texted me, like, after the first period, and you're like, Dubas might not last the period. Like, it's 6-0 through 20 minutes, and they end up losing it 7-1. And it's just been a tough year for Pittsburgh. They can't get a save. They can't defend. I mean, your boy, Erik Karlsson, like, doesn't know how to play hockey right now in his own end. It's kind of wild to see how crazy he has really fallen off after putting up, 100 points just 2 years ago. Looked like he had revitalized his career. It's not going well in Pittsburgh right now. You could say that for a lot of guys on that team. So it's not a good spot, man. Like, if you're a Penguins fan watching this and watching what you were told was going to be one last ditch effort to try and win a Stanley Cup. I mean, if you're watching this game with any eyeballs that's not Penguins covered, yellow glazed glasses, you could tell this is not a Stanley Cup team. It's not a team that's going to compete. Might not even be a playoff team. And we could see this team kind of get dismantled. And it's very interesting, that report that you mentioned earlier about everyone being on the table except Crosby. So that's Geno Malkin. That's Chris Letang, Erik Karlsson, Brian Rust is a terrific player. Like, there's a lot of guys that could be picked off here from the Pittsburgh Penguins if they decide to kind of tear it down and try and get a quick reboot for those final 2 years for Crosby.
But who's going to take these contracts?
I don't
None
know.
of these are expiring deals.
Yeah, it's tough. Obviously, the good thing is that we are expected to see the cap continue to rise by 5% each year. So those cap hits, get lessened a little bit when you look at percentage of cap. So that is the one saving grace, I suppose. So there may be teams out there that are willing to take a chance on a Geno Malkin for the next 2 years, or possibly a Chris Letang. I think Russ is still young enough where that contract makes sense to acquire, but it is going to be tough, right? And there's not a lot of teams that have a lot of cap space anyway, so it's going to have to take some creativity, probably taking on some money for Pittsburgh themselves to make these deals happen. But at the end of the day, if Pittsburgh wants to move on from these players, and these players want to still compete for Stanley Cups, it's not going to happen in Pitt. So they might be able to find a way to find takers for these contracts. Like, you wouldn't take Geno on Ottawa right now if you could find out a way to make it happen. They eat some salary, they take on some salary, and all of a sudden it only costs you like $3 million or $3 or $4 million against the cap. Get another team to retain, you pay him a little bit. I think it's possible. He's got 2 years left?
Yeah, well, this year and one more after this. Like, Malkin's definitely a movable deal. I don't think Ottawa would be the fit. If anything, I think Ottawa needs a defenseman.
Toronto is, I can tell you that.
Yeah,
they need a second line center bad.
You think Dubas would do business with Toronto?
That's the one thing that I don't think Dubas would do that. I really, really don't think so. Or to be asking, the ask would be astronomical.
The premium?
Oh, dude, it'd be wild. I mean, look, the Leafs ran into that same situation a year ago with Chris Tanev. Like, what the Flames were asking Toronto, and Brad Treliving specifically, for Chris Tanev was absorbently more than what they were asking from the Dallas Stars. An interconference rival, I might add. Not a rival, but like a team that they have to go up against in the playoffs. And they gave him away for like a second and a fifth or something like that, where the price for Toronto, it was a guaranteed lock, had to be a first-round pick plus. And they didn't make the play, and Chris Tanev ended up in Toronto anyway, so it worked out well for the Maple Leafs. But yeah, I'd be curious to see if he would pick up a phone call from Brad Treliving. It'd be stupid not to. It really would be. But yeah, we'll see. Maybe Nick Robertson, his boy, maybe Nicky Bobby could make his way over to Pittsburgh. He's sitting out tonight against Washington. So
my prediction is things get worse before they get better in Pittsburgh. And things are bad when you're trying to manipulate the schedule to hide players from their home crowd. Josh Yeo covers the Pittsburgh Penguins with The Athletic, saying that his sense is that they want to start Tristan Jarry his next game on the road because the home crowd has turned on him multiple times this season.
Dude, they signed that guy a year ago to a 5-6 year deal. And
a lot of people knew that didn't look that great at the time.
No, you're right. You're right away. Everyone was like, Kyle, that's too much term and too much money. Like Lou Lamoriello said it best a couple of years back about the Bo Horvat deal. Too much term, too much money. And that's exactly what he did. He did that for a lot of players, though. I mean, Lars Eller was that too. Technically, he got out of that deal by moving him over to Washington. But they signed a defenseman too that summer that really has not panned out to like a 5-year deal at like 5.
Oh, it was Ryan Graves.
Yeah, Ryan Graves signed him to a big deal, and that hasn't worked out for them either. Like, it hasn't gone well for Dubas, man. I'll say this though: there's a lot of people saying Dubas might get fired. No shot, no chance in hell. He signed a 7-year contract to be the GM there. The reason why he signed for 7 years, I remember saying this at the time when Dubas was rumored to be, going to Pittsburgh. I said, I bet he gets a long-term deal. Enough where he has a couple years to try and retool. If it doesn't work, enough time to rebuild, tear it down and rebuild, and have a few years on the back end to prove that there's growth. Like, there was a 7-year plan, right?
Yeah.
Try and stay relevant for 2 years, and then probably retool it for 3, and then see a bit of growth for 2. And that was kind of the 7-year plan that I assumed was happening in Pittsburgh. But it looks like that retool, rebuild, tear it down might have to come a little quicker than 2 years.
And with that, he's kind of doing a bit of rebuilding behind the scenes. You look at the return for Jake Gensel with Carolina. I know they get a roster player in Michael Bunting, but they also got a couple highly touted prospects in that trade. Ponomarev, if I'm not mistaken, or I know the other one was they're 2 Finnish kids, but they do have some upside to them. So you look at that as kind of an indicator. You're giving away a 40 goal scorer in Jake Gensel. And now you're looking at it, and I think they would have figured maybe a little more offense would have nibbled around the edges because, again, despite their slow start, Sidney Crosby still as elite as ever. Like,
Yeah,
they're
but Ross,
still getting carried.
think about it in hindsight. Does it make any sense to, if you're the Pittsburgh Penguins or if you're Kyle Dubas and ownership and you're trying to preach to your team and preach to Crosby, we're still trying to win here, trading away Jake Gensel for a couple of young players who weren't necessarily like highly touted first round picks, might be good players.
Vili
decent players.
Koivunen was the other one. Vasily Ponomarev and Vili Koivunen, the rights to Cruz Lucius, a conditional first round pick, and of course, Michael Bunting.
Right. So you look at that return, though, that doesn't scream, yeah, we're going to make that trade and still compete for a Stanley Cup. That those two things don't go hand in hand. That's what's so weird. It's like the messaging is one way, but the actions are another. But I think the action and the trade we just saw with Lars Eller probably speaks to, and now the reporting coming out of Pittsburgh that everyone's on the table, not named Crosby, probably is there's some legitimacy there. And if I was Kyle, I'd answer any phone calls on anyone at this point, even Sidney Crosby, if Sid's willing to go somewhere, which
I mean,
would love to see.
People have been speculating and wanting this to happen, and I'm in this boat. Like, doesn't the Colorado Avalanche just scream perfect spot for Sidney Crosby? Won't get into a playoff series in the next 2-3 years or anything where he has to play Pittsburgh and it gets awkward because he is all about the legacy. You can see that even with the most recent extension that he signed way below market value. But like, the NHL is better with Sidney Crosby in the playoffs, and he's now risking a third straight year without making the playoffs and has not been out of the first round since 2018 when he had 21 points in 12 games that year. The NHL and its fans need to see Sidney Crosby in the playoffs.
Dude, could you imagine Sid, McKinnon and Crosby down the middle, 1-2, middle stat, third line center? Like, dude, that would be so nasty.
I want to then have them out there on the power play together. And
what odds would you put that of happening though? Of Sidney Crosby not finishing his career with Pittsburgh? Like
8.7.
Yeah, honestly, good number, great number. I think you're about spot on. Yeah. So
everybody else on the table, and another report from Josh Yeo, and this is when you know things are bad when the beat reporters are getting the dirt, just saying this and that. Apparently, Erik Karlsson came out and defended his own play. And apparently, this is per Josh Yeo, members of the organization were pissed about that.
What?
Yeah.
Like they're pissed that he was defending himself?
Correct.
He's not taking accountability.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's what they breed up in Ottawa.
It's I mean, in Ottawa, he won 2 Norris trophies. He probably should have had another Norris trophy in 2016 when he had 82 points in 82 games, but I digress. Certainly the defensive side of his game. And again, just like when Erik Karlsson got traded to San Jose, you're like, they already have Brent Burns. Like, they already have a rover offensive defenseman. For him then to go to Pittsburgh where they already have Chris Letang, who's pretty much a poor man's Erik Karlsson, what are we doing here? Like, these are not fits.
Is their power play still atrocious? Like, they had one of the worst power plays in the NHL last year, and now they rank 17th. They still have a sub 20% power play, which is unbelievable for the talent they have, not only on the blue line, but at the forward group. Like, to be sub 20% on the power play, to be a back half of the league power play is outrageous. Like, it's really bad. Like, the Pittsburgh Penguins are bad, and things are only going to get worse, I think.
Cannot believe we're at this point already with the Pittsburgh Penguins. Quote, Sullivan didn't use any names, and I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but any reasonable amount of logic makes it exceedingly clear that the head coach's frustration level with Karlsson is growing. How could it not be? That's from November 7th. And then, of course, there was a report in the Swedish newspaper of some former Swedish coach saying that Karlsson shouldn't be on Team Sweden at the Four Nations. I mean, he was already one of the first 6 players named, so he's already on the team. But this is getting ugly, and I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. Again, Lars Eller already traded, and of note, The third round pick, the bigger of the two assets, is in 2027, which to me gives you an extra glimpse into the fact that Pittsburgh is hoping that that rebuild window, when they want the most picks, is still a couple of years away. So fascinating times for the last team in the league to break my heart, at least back in 2017, and a team that just was every year the model of consistency, playoffs, and Stanley Cup aspirations. The window is clearly closing in Pittsburgh, but Washington made some very creative moves this summer to reopen a new window. How's it working? Can the Capitals stay red hot? We'll discuss next. You're listening to Locked On NHL, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're looking to make some bets on all the action, FanDuel is the place to go. Right now, new customers can get a $5 bet, and if they win, we'll get $150 in bonus bets. The FanDuel Sportsbook app, if you haven't checked it out, it's awesome. Gives you everything you need to place live bets all in one place. So if you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, play-by-play, and so much more on the same place you make your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL and the Locked On Podcast Network. Welcome back, Locked On NHL, your team every day, and two franchises that have been attached at the hip since 2005 when Sidney Crosby and Alex Ovechkin both entered the NHL. The Washington Capitals seemingly in a extremely opposite direction. The Capitals are 10-4-0 so far this season, 7-3 in their last 10, 7-2 on home ice. Alex Ovechkin is showing no signs of slowing down. What's been their biggest secret to success?
Dude, it's everyone. It's depth up and down the lineup. Like, that's what it is. It's not just one guy leading the charge, right? Like, yeah, okay, you obviously have Alex Ovechkin, who's ripping home goals left, right, and center. He's got 10 goals in 14 games. But you know who else quietly has 10 goals in 14 games? His teammate Connor McMichael also has 10 goals in 14 games. You know who's leading the team in points? Dylan Strome, who's got 22 points in 14 games. It's actually quite remarkable what this team's been able to do this year. Really on the fly, they made some really shrewd moves in the summer to get younger, to get faster, to get stronger, heavier, and they've all worked out really, really well. And this is a team that's turned things around goaltending wise. Logan Thompson hasn't lost a game. They gave up basically nothing to get Logan Thompson out of Vegas, and he's 7-0 on the year. He's playing the game tonight against Toronto. Chance to go 8-0 on the season. Charlie Lindgren's played really well. Spencer Carberry has that Washington Capitals team rolling. They're averaging like over 4 goals a game. You know, like this team's legit, man. This Capital squad is legit.
That's incredible. And yeah, Pierre-Luc Dubois, and we know that there's a bit of a expiry tag in the past where he comes in and plays well. He does only have 1 goal, but still 8 points on the season in 14 games. And they don't need him to be a top 6 centerman now with the emergence of Dylan Strome being a top end player, leading the team in points, 22 points. So I think you can look at the Washington Capitals as one of the good stories in the NHL, and maybe the Penguins can look at them and say, hey, if we're creative with how we want to do things, maybe there is a path to a more sustainable way of getting back to the playoffs without completely blowing up what was the core that got them 3 cups already.
Yeah, maybe they should trade for Lars Eller.
Yeah, maybe that'd give them some more depth down the middle. You're buying the Washington Capitals? You think they're a top 3 team in the Metro? I mean, it's the top 2 are already dialed in with the Rangers and Hurricanes, and then you throw the Devils who are in there, they got off to a hot start. Devils have taken a bit of a step back, but they're still in the mix. Like, where do the Washington Capitals fit on that Metro hierarchy?
It's tough. It is tough. Like, obviously the Rangers and Hurricanes, I guess, are above these 2 just because they've been doing it for the last like 5 years. But it's really close at this point. Bit of a coin toss between the Capitals and the Devils. I mean, I've been a big Devils fan for years now, and they finally got the goalie, but I'm still waiting for them to really pop. I think Jack Hughes had like a 3-point night the other night, so maybe he's ready to get going this year. But yeah, what we've seen from Washington early on, very impressive, but it's got to remain, right? Like they've got to keep it going this year. I mean, I don't know if Dylan Strome who currently I believe is on pace for like 120 points, is going to be a 100-point player all season. So there's some regression that I'm sure is going to come at some point. But if Lindgren and Thompson can play well in net, maybe they can mitigate a little bit of that. They've got a lot of high shooting percentage guys, though. I will say that, like McMichael's shooting at 22%, Protosh is shooting at 22%, Ovi's at 20%, Nick Dowd, who has 4 goals, is shooting at 20%. So they've got a lot of guys who are on a bit of a shooting bender early in the year. So there is going to be some regression, but I still think that there's certainly a playoff team again. When at the beginning of the year, I wouldn't say that they weren't going to be competitive for a playoff spot, but it was definitely kind of a team that you're like, yeah, I could see them being on the outside looking in. I think they're certainly good enough to be a playoff team.
We will find out in a matter of months, but we are only weeks away from U.S. Thanksgiving, which is the first real indicator. I believe 80+% of teams that are in the playoffs on Thanksgiving in the States will make it when it comes time for April. We'll be back next week for more on the Eastern Conference. For now, we pass it over to Power Rankings Thursday. For Mike DiStefano, I'm Ross Levitan. You can find us at Locked On Maple Leafs, Locked On Senators. You're listening to the Locked On NHL podcast, your team every day.